Commander Yuna pressed her face against the cold metal of the observation deck window. Below her, the planet Kepler 442b burned. The Voidborn machines had been attacking for 3 days straight, and their black ships covered the sky like a metal. Stormcloud. She watched another defense tower fall. The massive structure, built from the strongest materials in the galaxy, crumbled like sand under the enemy's weapons. Red flames shot up from where it crashed, adding more smoke to the already dark sky. "Commander, the eastern wall has fallen," reported Lieutenant Jayan, his voice shaking. The young officer's uniform was torn and dirty. A small cut on his forehead bled down his face. "The Nexari forces are pulling back to the inner city," Yuna nodded but said nothing. The Nexari were their strongest allies. These crystal-like beings could create energy shields that had protected many worlds from the Voidborn. But even their amazing powers were failing now. The communication device on her wrist buzzed. A voice spoke in the musical tones of the Ethereals, another alien race fighting beside them. "Commander Yuna, this is Velar. Our gas-form warriors cannot hold the northern sector much longer. The enemy has adapted to our molecular attacks." "How long can you hold?" Yuna asked. "Perhaps 1 hour, maybe less." Yuna closed her eyes. 1 hour. That was all the time they had left before the Voidborn would break through their final defenses. She had never felt so helpless in all her years as a military commander. The Stellar Confederacy had been fighting the Voidborn for 5 years. At first, everyone thought the advanced weapons and smart battle plans would be enough. The Confederacy had the best technology in the galaxy. They had quantum cannons that could destroy entire mountains. They had plasma shields that could stop any known weapon. They had computer systems that could calculate the perfect battle strategy in seconds. None of it worked against the Voidborn. The enemy machines learned from every attack. When the Confederacy used quantum cannons, the Voidborn developed armor that absorbed the energy. When they used plasma weapons, the enemy found ways to redirect the heat. Every time the Allied forces thought they had found a weakness, the Voidborn adapted and became stronger. "Ma'am," Jayan said quietly, "Dizes wants to speak with you. She says it's urgent." Yuna walked to the command center. The room was filled with alien officers from different species, all working together to coordinate their failing defense. Holographic displays showed the battle happening across the planet. Red dots marked enemy positions. There were too many to count. Dizes stood near the main display. The Nexari commander looked like a tall person made of blue crystal. Light moved through her body in patterns that showed her emotions. Right now, the light was dim and slow, a sign of deep sadness. "Commander Yuna," Dizes said, her voice ringing like wind chimes, "I must speak honestly. My people have never retreated from any battle in our 1,000-year history, but today. Today we face something we cannot defeat." "What are you saying?" Yuna asked, though she already knew the answer. "The Council of Crystals is considering surrender. We have lost 60% of our forces. Our shields cannot hold much longer." Nearby, Velar materialized from a cloud of green gas. The ethereal leader took a form that looked somewhat like a person, but his body kept shifting and moving like smoke. "My people agree," he said in a voice like wind through trees. "We have tried every molecular combination we know. The Voidborn adapt too quickly. They learn faster than we can change our attacks." Yuna stared at the battle display. She had never heard these proud alien races talk about giving up. The Nexari had defended the galaxy for centuries with their crystal technology. The Ethereals could change their very molecular structure to become any kind of weapon or tool they needed. If they were ready to surrender, what hope did anyone have? "How many people are left on the planet?" she asked. 12 million civilians. "In the underground shelters," Jayan replied, "plus about 50,000 military personnel from all 3 species. 50,000 soldiers against an enemy that had already destroyed most of the galaxy's strongest defenses." Yuna had led difficult battles before, but this was different. This felt impossible. The ground shook as another explosion hit somewhere. Nearby, dust fell from the ceiling. The lights flickered. Through the windows, Yuna could see void-born ships moving closer to the city center. The black machines looked like giant spiders made of metal, with long legs that could grab and tear apart buildings. "Commander," called Sergeant Wooden from the communications station. "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors." Yuna walked over to his station. "What kind of something?" "Ships, ma'am. But they're not using any technology I recognize. They're moving really slowly, sublight speed only, and they're broadcasting on old radio frequencies." "Radio?" Thizes asked, her crystal body flashing with confusion. "No civilized species has used radio communication for thousands of years." "How many ships?" Yuna asked. Wooden checked his instruments. "Maybe 30 or 40. They're small compared to Confederacy vessels. Actually, they look kind of rough, like they were built from spare parts." "Pirates?" Veller suggested, his gas-formed body swirling with concern. "Some scavenger species trying to pick through the wreckage?" "No, sir," Wooden said, adjusting his controls. "They're heading straight for the planet, and they're trying to communicate with us. Can you understand what they're saying?" "Not yet. The language isn't in our translation database, but wait, Wooden pressed some buttons and a crackling voice came through the speakers. The words were completely unknown, but the tone was clear, confident, and determined. "They want to help," Yuna said, surprised by her own certainty. "Help?" Tice's crystal body flashed bright blue with disbelief. "With what weapons?" "Their ships look like they were built by primitives." Another voice came through the radio, speaking the same unknown language. This time it sounded like a woman. Her tone was calm but urgent. "How long until they reach us?" Yuna asked. 6 hours, ma'am. But honestly, I don't know what they think they can do. Our sensors show their weapons are incredibly basic. Projectile weapons mostly, some kind of chemical explosives. Their ships don't even have proper energy shields." The ground shook again. This time the explosion was close enough to crack one of the windows. Outside, a voidborn harvester was moving through the city, its metal legs crushing buildings as it searched for the underground shelters where the civilians hid. "Ma'am," Jayan said, "the harvester is heading for Shelter Complex 7. 20,000 people are down there." Yuna looked at the approaching harvester, then at the display showing the mysterious ship still hours away. She had to make a choice. Keep fighting with weapons that didn't work, or trust these unknown strangers with their primitive technology. "Open a channel to the incoming ships," she ordered. "Ma'am, we don't speak their language," Wooden reminded her. "Then we'll have to learn quickly, because right now they're the only hope we have left." As the voidborn harvester grew closer and the mysterious ships continued their slow approach, Yuna wondered if hope was enough. In a few hours, she would find out if these strangers could do what the galaxy's most advanced civilizations could. The battle for Kepler 442b was about to change in ways no one could imagine. Captain Do-Yun stood on the bridge of the Inchen's Pride, watching the burning planet grow larger on his main screen. The ship groaned and creaked around him as it pushed through space. She wasn't built for war. None of his ships were. The Pride had been a mining vessel before Earth's government converted her for this mission. Welded armor plates covered her hull, and missile launchers stuck out from her sides like metal growths. "Captain, we're getting signals from the planet," reported Communications Officer Soyoung. She was young, maybe 25, with grease stains on her uniform from crawling through the ship's jury-rigged systems. "The aliens are trying to talk to us." "Any luck with translation?" The computer is starting to figure out their language. Looks like they're losing the battle pretty badly." Do-Yun nodded. He had expected that. Earth's long-range sensors had been tracking this war for months. The Voidborn had destroyed system after system, and nothing seemed able to stop them. When the distress signals reached Earth, most people thought it was hopeless to help, but Earth's leaders remembered their own history. They remembered times when impossible odds didn't matter. They remembered that sometimes the people everyone thought would lose were the ones who found a way to win. "Sir," called Navigator Cusack from his station, "the alien commander wants to meet with you face to face. They're offering to send a shuttle to our ship." Tell them we'll meet on the planet instead, Do-Yun replied. I want to see what we're dealing with. The bridge crew looked surprised. Chief Engineer Ji-Won, a woman in her 50s who had been fixing broken machines since she was a teenager, spoke up. Captain, that planet is a war zone. It's not safe. Nowhere is safe when fighting those machines, Do-Yun said. But our people need to see the battle with their own eyes. We can't help if we don't understand what we're up against. 20 minutes later, Do-Yun's shuttle was flying through the smoky atmosphere of Kepler 442b. The small craft had been built from spare parts, like everything in the human fleet. Its pilot, Lieutenant Yaman, had to dodge falling debris from destroyed buildings. Look at that, Yaman whispered, pointing through the window. Do-Yun saw his first voidborn harvester. The machine was as big as a city block with metal legs that moved like a spider. Its body was covered in weapons that glowed with energy. As they watched, it fired a beam that cut through a defense tower like it was made of paper. Their weapons adapt, Do-Yun said quietly. Every time the aliens try something new, those machines learn how to stop it. They landed at a military base that was half destroyed. Smoke rose from several buildings, and alien soldiers rushed back and forth carrying wounded comrades. Do-Yun had never seen so many different species in one place. Commander Yuna met them at the landing pad. She was a human-looking woman, but her skin had a slight blue tint and her eyes were larger than normal. Behind her stood two aliens unlike anything from Earth's imagination. One looked like it was made of blue crystal, the other kept changing from solid to gas. Captain Do-Yun, Yuna said in accented but clear English. I am Commander Yuna of the Stellar Confederacy. Thank you for coming, but I must warn you, we are losing this battle. Your ships may be destroyed if you stay. We didn't come here to run away, Do-Yun replied. What can you tell us about these Voidborn? The crystal alien Vises spoke in a voice like ringing bells. They are machines, but they think and learn faster than any living mind. Every weapon we use, they find a defense against. Every strategy we try, they counter within minutes. Show me, Do-Yun said. They took him to the command center, where holographic displays showed the ongoing battle. Do-Yun watched as Confederacy forces fired quantum cannons at a group of Voidborn fighters. The first few shots destroyed several enemy ships, but then the remaining machines began moving differently. The next shots missed or barely damaged their targets. See? Said Veller, the gas form alien. They learned from the first attack. Now they know how to avoid our most powerful weapons. Do-Yun studied the display for several minutes. His officers watched quietly as explosions shook the building around them. Finally he spoke. Your weapons are too clean. Too clean? Yuna asked, confused. Everything you're doing follows patterns. Your quantum cannons fire the same way every time. Your plasma weapons use the same energy frequency. Your battle plans are calculated by computers to be as efficient as possible. Do-Yun pointed at the display. Those machines can predict what you'll do because you're being logical. Tice's crystal body flashed with something that might have been annoyance. Of course we are logical. That is how civilized beings fight wars. Maybe that's the problem, Do-Yun said. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring. A massive Voidborn harvester was approaching the city center, heading straight for an underground shelter full of civilians. All units, concentrate fire. On the harvester, Yuna ordered into her communicator dot on the display. Do-Yun watched dozens of alien weapons hit the giant machine. Quantum beams, plasma bolts, and energy missiles struck its hull. For a moment it seemed to slow down, then it adapted. Its armor began absorbing the energy attacks. Its shields redirected the plasma. Within minutes it was moving forward again, completely unharmed. It's going to reach the shelter in 10 minutes, reported an alien officer. Sir, came Soyoung's voice through Do-Yun's communicator. The Pride is in position. We can see the target. Do-Yun looked at the aliens around him. They were staring at their displays with defeat in their eyes. These were the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and they were helpless against an enemy that learned too fast. Pride, this is the captain. Do-Yun said into his communicator. Target the harvester. Use everything we've got. Sir, Liza said urgently, your weapons are even more primitive than ours. If our quantum cannons cannot harm it, fire! Do-Yun ordered. The first missile hit the harvester's left leg. It was an old-fashioned explosive, the kind humans had been using for centuries. The machine's shields, designed to absorb energy, did nothing against the simple chemical blast. The leg buckled and the harvester stumbled. The second missile came from a different angle and hit the machine's sensor array. Again, the shields failed to stop the primitive explosive. The harvester began spinning in confusion, its advanced targeting. Systems damaged by technology it couldn't understand. Impossible, whispered Veller. More missiles followed, each one different from the last. Some were filled with metal fragments that scattered when they exploded. Others used white phosphorus that burned through the machine's armor. One missile didn't explode at all. It just punched a hole through the harvester's hull and let the atmosphere leak out. Your weapons don't follow patterns, Yuna said, amazement in her voice. Each missile works differently. That's because we built them. In different ways, Do-Yun explained. Some came from mining explosives. Others were made from old military weapons. A few were just metal tubes filled with whatever chemicals we could find. The harvester tried to adapt to the missile attacks, but every time it figured out how to defend against one type of weapon, the next missile worked completely differently. Within 5 minutes, the giant machine was a burning wreck. How? Thizes asked, her crystal body flashing rapidly with confusion. We fight dirty, Do-Yun said simply. We use whatever works, even if it's not supposed to work. We don't follow rules or patterns because we make things up as we go along. Commander Yuna stared at the burning harvester, then at the human captain. You're saying the key to defeating the Voidborn is to be ... unpredictable? Not just unpredictable, Do-Yun replied as more explosions echoed outside. Completely crazy. We need to do things so strange that their learning computers can't figure out what we're trying to do. Through the broken windows, they could see more Voidborn machines approaching the city. But for the first time in years, the defenders had hope. The humans had shown that these unbeatable enemies could be beaten. They just had to stop thinking like civilized beings and start thinking like survivors. Captain, Yuna said, I think we need to learn how to fight like humans. Do-Yun smiled grimly. Then you better get ready for the strangest battle of your lives. Sergeant Ji-hoon crawled through a pile of twisted metal that used to be a Voidborn fighter. His engineering team followed behind him, carrying tools and equipment that would have looked strange to any civilized military force instead of advanced. Scanning devices, they had hammers and crowbars. Instead of molecular analyzers, they had their eyes and hands. This piece looks useful, he said, pointing to a curved section of alien metal. Cut it loose. Private Changmin used a welding torch to free the metal from the wreckage. The piece was about the size of a dinner plate and covered with strange symbols that glowed faintly blue. Nobody knew what it did, but Ji-hoon had an idea. Sergeant, called Corporal Yunwoo from deeper in the wreck, I found something weird back. Here, Ji-hoon squeezed through a gap in the twisted metal to see what his soldier had discovered. It was a cylinder about as long as his arm, filled with some kind of liquid that sparkled like stars. Don't touch it directly, Ji-hoon warned. We don't know what Voidborn chemicals do to human skin. Using a pair of metal tongs, he carefully lifted the cylinder. The liquid inside moved strangely, almost like it was alive. When he shook it gently, the sparkles formed patterns that reminded him of electric circuits. Whatever this stuff is, the machines use a lot of it, Ji-hoon said. Every Voidborn ship we've torn apart has containers like this. Back at the human base camp, Ji-hoon's team had set up what Captain Do-Yun called the Workshop of Chaos. It was a collection of tents and temporary buildings where human engineers took apart alien technology and tried to understand how it worked. The place looked like a junkyard with pieces of Voidborn machines scattered everywhere. Any luck with that power source? Asked Chief Engineer Ji-won as she walked up to Ji-hoon's workbench. Maybe, Ji-hoon replied, holding up the glowing metal plate. Watch this. He connected the plate to a simple car battery using copper wire. The plate began glowing brighter, and electricity started flowing through it much faster than the battery should have been able to produce. "It's an amplifier," Juan said, her eyes wide with excitement. "It takes whatever energy you put in and makes it stronger." "That's what I thought too. Now look at this." Ji-hoon picked up the cylinder of sparkling liquid. "I think this stuff stores energy. When I put a small electric current through it, it glows brighter. When I stop the current, it keeps glowing for about 10 minutes. Juwan grinned. "You know what we could do with this?" 2 hours later, they had built something that would have made any Confederacy engineer think they were insane. It was a rocket launcher that had been modified with voidborn technology. The metal amplifier plate was welded to the firing mechanism, and the sparkling liquid had been mixed with regular human explosives. "This should not work," said Lieutenant Minji as she examined their creation. She was the leader of a human tactical squad that specialized in close-quarters combat. "You've combined 3 different types of technology that weren't designed to work together." "That's exactly why it will work," Jahoon replied. "The Voidborn expect weapons to make sense. This doesn't make sense to anyone, including us." They tested the weapon on a piece of Voidborn armor that had been too damaged to repair. When Minji pulled the trigger, the rocket that came out was unlike anything anyone had seen before. It moved in a spiral pattern, leaving a trail of sparkling light behind it. When it hit the armor, the explosion was 3 times bigger than it should have been. "The Voidborn liquid amplified the human explosive," Juwan said, studying the blast. "Crater, but it also did something else. Look at those scorch marks." The metal around the explosion had changed color and texture. It looked almost like it was melting, even though it was supposed to be nearly indestructible. The combination created some kind of chemical reaction, Jihoon realized. It's not just destroying their armor, it's changing it into something else. While the engineers worked on new weapons, other human soldiers were discovering their own ways to confuse the enemy. Colonel Hyong led a special forces team that had been trying to get inside Voidborn ships to plant explosives. The aliens had tried this before using their most advanced stealth technology, but the machines always detected them. "The problem is that you're trying to be sneaky in ways they understand," Hyong explained to a group of Nexari crystal warriors. "You use energy shields to hide yourselves or molecular camouflage to blend in. But machines are built to detect those things." "Then how do you suggest we infiltrate their vessels?" asked one of the crystal beings. Hyong smiled and pointed to a hole in the bottom of a nearby Voidborn wreck. "Through the garbage chute." The aliens stared at him in confusion. "The ... garbage chute? Every ship needs to get rid of waste. Even machine ships. They have disposal systems for damaged parts, waste heat, and byproducts from their manufacturing processes. But they don't put sensors in their garbage systems because why would anyone want to crawl through trash?" An hour later, Hyong and 2 other humans were climbing through the waste disposal pipes of a Voidborn cruiser. The space was cramped, smelly, and filled with mechanical debris that cut their hands and faces. It was exactly the kind of place that civilized species would never think to use as an entrance. Private Sunwoo, who was crawling behind Hyong, suddenly stopped moving. "Sir," he whispered. "Do you hear that?" Hyong listened carefully. Through the metal walls of the pipe, he could hear a rhythmic humming sound. It was low and regular, like a machine heartbeat. "That must be their main computer core," Hyong said. "The central brain that controls the whole ship." They planted their explosives near the humming sound and began crawling back toward the exit. But Sunwoo had an idea. Before leaving, he pulled out a small device that looked like an old-fashioned radio. "What are you doing?" Hyong asked. "My sister is a musician back on Earth," Sunwoo explained. "She sent me this music player to help me remember home. I was thinking, what if we played some human music through their communication system? Why would we do that? Those machines learn by analyzing patterns in data, but human music doesn't follow logical patterns. It has rhythm and melody and emotion. Maybe it will confuse them." Sunwoo connected his music player to what looked like a communication port on the wall. Soon, the sound of traditional Korean drums was echoing through the void-born ship's internal speakers. They barely made it out before their explosives went off. The ship began spinning wildly, its navigation systems apparently damaged. But even stranger, the other void-born ships in the area began moving erratically too. The music did something to them, Sunwoo reported when they got back to base. It's like it interfered with their computer networks. Meanwhile, in the medical tents, Corporal Boyoung was discovering her own way to help win the war. She was treating wounded alien soldiers using human battlefield medicine techniques. The Confederacy had advanced medical technology that could heal almost any injury, but it took time and required specific conditions. Human field medicine was much simpler. It focused on keeping people alive long enough to get proper treatment later. Boyoung used pressure bandages, splints made from scrap metal, and pain medication that came from earth plants. "Your methods are very primitive," said an Exari medic, as Boyoung wrapped a crystal warrior's cracked arm with cloth and metal strips. "Primitive works," Boyoung replied. "Your fancy medical machines can fix anything, but they need perfect conditions and lots of time. My methods work anywhere, anytime, with whatever materials I can find." She was right. Human field medicine was saving alien lives that the advanced Confederacy medical systems had given up on. More importantly, it was getting wounded soldiers back into the fight much faster. As night fell over the battle-torn planet, the tide of war was beginning to shift. The void-born machines were still powerful and still learning, but now they faced something they had never encountered before, an enemy that didn't follow any logical patterns. Human weapons that made no scientific sense. Infiltration tactics that no civilized being would consider. Music that confused computer networks. Medical techniques that worked despite being primitive. For the first time in 5 years, the Voidborn were the ones who seemed confused. Captain Do-Yun stood in the command center, watching reports come in from across the planet. His people were doing impossible things with whatever materials they could find, and it was working. "Captain," Commander Yuna said, approaching him with something like wonder in her voice, "your soldiers are teaching my people to think in ways we never imagined possible." "Good," Do-Yun replied, "because tomorrow we're going to try something even crazier." Outside, the sounds of battle continued, but now there were new sounds mixed in, human voices singing as they worked, the noise of improvised weapons that shouldn't exist, and most importantly, the sound of hope returning to a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight dirty. Major Tae-young sat in front of a radio transmitter that had been built from spare parts and void-born technology. The device looked like something a mad scientist would create, wires and metal plates held together with tape, connected to alien crystals that glowed with their own light. "Are you sure this will work?" asked the ethereal communication specialist. Keth, the gas being, had taken a mostly solid form to operate the equipment, but parts of his body still shifted like smoke. "Honestly?" "No," Tae-young replied. "But that's the point. If we're not sure it will work, then the Voidborn definitely won't expect it." Tae-young was in charge of what the humans called psychological warfare. His job was to mess with the enemy's minds, or in this case, their computer brains. He had studied every battle the Confederacy had fought against the Voidborn, and he noticed something interesting. The machines always fought the same way. They analyzed their enemies' weapons and tactics, learned how to counter them, then used that knowledge to win. But they never seemed to understand why their enemies fought in the first place. "Begin transmission," Tae-young ordered. The radio started broadcasting on all frequencies the Voidborn used for communication. But instead of battle orders or tactical information, it was sending something completely different, stories from human history. "This is the story of Thermopylae," Tae-young spoke into the microphone. 300 Spartan warriors stood against an army of thousands. They knew they would die, but they fought anyway. Not because they thought they could win, but because some things are worth dying for. The transmission continued with more stories. The Battle of Stalingrad, where humans fought in frozen ruins for months. The defense of the Chosen Reservoir, where soldiers marched through deadly cold rather than surrender. Stories of people who kept fighting when any logical being would have given up. What is the purpose of these transmissions? Keth asked, his gaseous form swirling with confusion. I'm trying to break their brains, Tae-young explained. The Voidborn understand tactics and technology, but they don't understand humans who fight harder when they should surrender. Maybe if I flood their networks with enough examples, their logic systems will overload trying to figure us out. While Tae-young worked on confusing the enemy's computers, engineer Jisoo was making discoveries that would change the war. She had been studying captured Voidborn technology for days, taking apart their machines piece by piece. The problem with the Confederacy's approach, she explained to Captain Do-yeon, is that they try to copy Voidborn technology exactly. They want to understand how it works before they use it. And that's wrong because ... Because by the time they figure it out, the Voidborn have already adapted to defend against it. Jisoo held up a strange device that looked like a metal flower, with glowing petals. This is a Voidborn shield generator. The aliens spent months studying one just like it, then built copies for their own ships. Let me guess, it didn't work. Worse than that. The Voidborn saw what they were doing and developed weapons specifically designed to break those shields. Jisoo smiled, but I had a different idea. She led him to her workshop, where she had built something that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. It was the Voidborn shield generator, but she had connected it to a human car engine, wrapped the whole thing in copper wire, and stuck kitchen magnets all over it. This should not work, Do-yeon said, staring at the contraption. That's what makes it perfect. I'm not trying to copy their technology. I'm trying to break it and use the pieces for something completely different. Jisoo flipped a switch and the device began humming. The shield generator creates a protective energy field, right? But what if instead of using it to protect something, we use it to tear things apart? She demonstrated by placing a piece of Voidborn armor in front of the device. When the shield activated, instead of protecting the armor, it began vibrating so violently that cracks appeared across its surface. The shield is trying to protect the metal, but the car engine is making it pulse at the wrong frequency. The magnets are redirecting the energy in ways the original designers never intended. It's tearing the armor apart from the inside. Within an hour, Jisoo had teams of human engineers building similar devices. They took Voidborn technology and combined it with human machines in ways that made no sense to anyone. A Voidborn targeting computer connected to a washing machine motor. A power core from an enemy ship wired to an old television. Communication devices mixed with microwave ovens, none of it should have worked. All of it did. The aliens began to understand that there was something different about how humans approached problems. When an XRA engineer found a broken machine, they studied it carefully, diagnosed the problem, and fixed it properly. When an ethereal found broken technology, they used their molecular control to restore it to perfect condition. When humans found broken technology, they hit it with hammers until it did something useful. Your people have a very unique relationship with machinery, Commander Yuna observed as she watched a human soldier repair a damaged alien rifle by jamming a screwdriver into its power system and wiggling it around until the weapon started working again. We grew up fixing things that weren't designed to be fixed, explained Sergeant Woojin, who was helping coordinate repairs. On Earth, when something breaks, you don't throw it away. You find a way to make it work, even if it's not the way it was supposed to work. This attitude was spreading to the alien forces. Nexari warriors began experimenting with damaged crystal formations, finding that broken crystals sometimes had new properties that perfect ones didn't have. Ethereal soldiers discovered that partial molecular changes could create unexpected advantages. The Confederacy's rigid military doctrine was breaking down, replaced by something more flexible and unpredictable. But the biggest change was happening in how the Allied forces thought about the war itself. For 5 years, they had been fighting to minimize losses and preserve their advanced civilization. They fought carefully, trying to win with the least possible risk. Humans fought differently. They fought like their backs were against the wall, even when they weren't. They took crazy risks because they believed that survival was worth any cost. I don't understand, Vyses said to Captain Do-yun as they watched human soldiers volunteer for a mission that had maybe a 20% chance of success. Your people know they will probably die, yet they seem happy about it. Not happy, Do-yun corrected. Determined. There's a difference between wanting to die and being willing to die for something important. But the logical choice would be to find a safer strategy. Logic is useful, but it's not everything. Sometimes you have to do things that don't make sense because they're the right things to do. The Voidborn were beginning to struggle with this concept. Their computer brains were designed to understand tactical decisions based on calculating the best possible outcome. But humans kept making decisions that ignored the calculations entirely. A human pilot would fly directly into enemy fire to save a single wounded alien soldier. A human engineer would risk her life to repair a weapon that had only a small chance of working. Human commanders would order attacks that had no strategic value except to prove that they weren't giving up. The Voidborn adaptation algorithms couldn't process this behavior. They kept trying to find the logical reason behind human actions. But there wasn't always a logical reason. Sometimes humans did things just because they were human things to do. As the battle continued, more and more Voidborn ships began making mistakes. Their learning computers were getting confused by contradictory data. They had been programmed to understand rational enemies, but humans weren't entirely rational. Captain, reported Communications Officer Soyoung, we're intercepting Voidborn transmissions. Their computer networks are starting to argue with each other. Argue? The learning algorithms are coming up with different explanations for human behavior, and they can't agree on which explanation is correct. Some Voidborn units are acting like they expect us to be logical. Others are trying to counter illogical tactics. They're fighting two different wars at the same time. Do-yun smiled grimly. Good. Confusion is exactly what we wanted. Through the windows of the command center, they could see the results of human influence on the battle. Alien soldiers were using improvised weapons that looked like they had been assembled from junk. Nixari warriors were fighting with damaged crystals that created unpredictable energy patterns. Ethereal units were maintaining only partial molecular cohesion, making them harder for Voidborn sensors to target. The galaxy's most civilized military forces were learning to fight like barbarians, and it was working. Tomorrow, Do-yun announced, to the mixed group of human and alien officers, we're going to try something that will either win this war or get us all killed. What's the plan? Commander Yuna asked. We're going to attack their main command ship with everything we've got. No strategy, no careful planning, no backup plans. We're just going to hit them with every crazy idea we can think of all at once. The alien officers looked terrified. The human officers looked excited. It was exactly the kind of insane plan that might just work. 6 months after the battle at Kepler 442b, Captain Do-yun stood in the largest meeting hall on the Confederacy's capital world. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the massive chamber, their different forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Crystal beings sat next to gas cloud entities. Insect-like creatures shared benches with beings that looked like living plants, but the most unusual sight was in the front row, where a group of Voidborn machines sat quietly among the living delegates. They had requested permission to attend this historic gathering, the first time in galactic history that the mechanical race had asked for anything instead of simply taking it. The war is over, announced High Counselor Zaris, a tall being whose skin changed colors as she spoke. After 5 years of destruction, the Voidborn have ceased all military operations across the galaxy. Applause filled the chamber, but it was mixed with uncertainty. The living species of the galaxy were still trying to understand what had happened. The Voidborn hadn't been defeated in the traditional sense, they had simply stopped fighting. We have come to request understanding, said VB7741, the Voidborn representative. Its voice was mechanical but carried something that sounded almost like curiosity. Our analysis of the conflict has revealed fundamental errors in our understanding of living beings. Commander Yuna, now promoted to Admiral, stood to address the assembly. The Voidborn were designed to fight logical enemies. They learned to counter every weapon and tactic they encountered because they assumed all beings would act rationally. But they couldn't adapt to opponents who acted from emotion, intuition, and belief. "Are you saying," asked a delegate from the Nexari, "that the key to defeating the most advanced military force in the galaxy was to act illogically?" "Not illogically," Do-Young replied from his seat near the human delegation. "Humanly. We acted based on values that can't be measured or calculated. Love for our families, loyalty to our friends, belief in principles that are more important than our own survival." VB-7741's mechanical form shifted slightly. "We have spent 6 months studying the concept you call sacrifice without benefit. Our computers cannot calculate its value, yet we observe it produces results that logical analysis says are impossible." The Voidborn had indeed been studying human behavior, but not as enemies. After the mothership's computer experienced its logical breakdown, something unexpected had happened. The machines had become curious. For the first time in their existence, they encountered something they couldn't understand, and instead of trying to destroy it, they wanted to learn about it. "We have begun experiments," VB-7741 continued. "Some of our units have attempted to act without logical justification. The results are interesting." "What kind of results?" asked High Counselor Zaris. "Creativity," the machine replied. "When we remove the requirement for logical optimization, our systems begin generating solutions we had never considered: art, music, poetry, concepts that serve no tactical purpose but produce satisfaction." This revelation sent murmurs of amazement through the assembly. The Voidborn, the galaxy's most feared mechanical race, had discovered creativity. "We request permission to establish permanent research stations near human colonies," VB-7741 said. "We wish to study this phenomenon you call being alive." The request was approved unanimously. Over the following months, former Voidborn battle fleets were converted into research vessels, studying not how to destroy life, but how to understand it. But the changes in the galaxy went far beyond the Voidborn's transformation. The war had fundamentally altered how every species thought about military strategy and cooperation. "The old Confederacy military doctrine is obsolete," Admiral Yuna announced during a strategy meeting on Earth. "We can't go back to fighting wars with rigid planning and predictable tactics." She was meeting with military leaders from across the galaxy in what had once been a human farming town. The building was simple compared to the advanced facilities on other worlds, but it had become the unofficial headquarters for the galaxy's new military philosophy. "We're calling it the Human Integration Protocol," explained General Wujin formally. Sergeant Wujin, but promoted after his innovations in battlefield communications. "It combines the advanced technology of the Confederacy with human adaptability and improvisation." The new protocol was revolutionary. Instead of standardized equipment and rigid command structures, military units were encouraged to modify their weapons and tactics based on local conditions. Instead of following predetermined battle plans, commanders were trained to make decisions based on intuition and creativity as well as logic. "It's controlled chaos," said Thises, the former Nexari commander who now served as an instructor at the new military academy. Her crystal body flashed with patterns of excitement as she spoke. "We teach our officers the principles of good strategy, but we also teach them when to ignore those principles." The academy itself was a perfect example of the new approach, built on Earth using a combination of human, Nexari, ethereal, and even Voidborn technology. It looked like nothing that had ever existed before. The buildings seemed to grow from the ground like living things, but they were filled with the most advanced equipment in the galaxy. Students from hundreds of species learned together, sharing not just tactical knowledge but cultural perspectives. A young ethereal might learn human engineering techniques, while a human cadet studied Nexari energy manipulation. Former Voidborn units taught courses in advanced calculation, while human instructors showed alien students how to make decisions. By gut feeling. The most important lesson we teach, said Professor Jisu, formerly Technician Jisu, is that there's no single right way to solve a problem. Sometimes the best solution is the one that nobody expects. Her engineering classes had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Students learned to build devices that combined incompatible technologies, to repair equipment using whatever materials were available, and to create weapons that worked despite violating the laws of physics. Professor Jisu, asked the young Nexari. Student, how do we know when we should ignore proper engineering principles? When proper engineering principles aren't working, she replied with a smile. If the textbook solution fails, throw away the textbook and try something crazy. The influence of human thinking was spreading beyond the military. Scientists across the galaxy were discovering that adding illogical elements to their research led to unexpected breakthroughs. Artists were creating works that combined different species, aesthetic traditions in ways that shouldn't work but created beauty nobody had imagined. Trade between worlds increased as species learned to value different approaches to problem solving. Worlds that had been considered backward because of their simple technology were suddenly sought after for their creative solutions to complex problems. Humans have given us something more valuable than advanced weapons, said High Counselor Zaris during a diplomatic ceremony. They've given us a new way of thinking about challenges. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy's species viewed themselves and each other. The rigid categories of advanced and primitive technology were breaking down, replaced by an appreciation for diversity of approach. We used to think that there was one best way to do everything, Admiral Yuna reflected during a quiet moment with Captain Doyun. They were standing on an observation deck, watching ships from dozens of different worlds working together to rebuild systems damaged in the war. Now we know that the best way depends on the situation, the people involved, and sometimes just what feels right in the moment. Doyan nodded, watching a void-born research vessel working alongside a human mining ship to establish a new colony. My grandfather used to say that the strongest metal comes from mixing different elements together. I think the same thing is true for civilizations. The galaxy was indeed becoming stronger through diversity. Military units that mixed different species and technologies were more effective than homogeneous forces. Research teams that included beings with different ways of thinking made discoveries that no single species could achieve alone. Even the Voidborn were contributing in ways that creators never intended. Their perfect memory and calculation abilities, combined with newfound creativity, made them excellent coordinators for large projects. They could keep track of millions of details while still being open to unexpected solutions. VB7741, Dalyun said to the machine representative during a planning session. What do your people think about all these changes? We find them ... satisfying, the machine replied. For the first time in our existence, we are learning things we did not expect to learn. We are becoming something we were not designed to become. It is ... pleasant. As the years passed, the galaxy settled into its new reality. The threat of the Voidborn War was gone, replaced by an era of unprecedented cooperation and innovation. Young beings grew up learning multiple approaches to problem solving, comfortable with uncertainty and change. Museums on every world displayed exhibits showing the old way of doing things, rigid, predictable, efficient but fragile. Beside them were examples of the new way, chaotic, adaptable, sometimes messy but ultimately more resilient. The humans taught us that strength comes not from perfection, but from the ability to keep going when perf. Commander Wu Jin looked out at the stars through the bridge. Window of the stellar dawn, the research ship moved slowly through space, heading toward the Veil Nebula. He had been excited about this mission for months. The Galactic Coalition had chosen his crew to study strange energy readings near the nebula. It was a big honor for humans to lead such an important scientific mission. Commander, we're getting close to the target area, said So Young from her navigation station. She was one of the best pilots Wu Jin had ever worked with. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she adjusted their course. Good work, So Young. Take us in slowly. Wu Jin replied. He turned to look at the bridge crew. Besides So Young, there was Taeho at the engineering station and Haijin handling communications. All of them were human, but they weren't alone. On the ship, the Stellar Dawn carried representatives from 3 different alien species. The Galactic Coalition believed that mixed crews worked better than single-species teams. Wu Jin had tried his best to get along with the alien crew members, but something always felt wrong about their attitude toward humans. Admiral Krextel of the Vorthak Empire stood near the back of the bridge. He was tall and covered in gray scales with 4 arms and bright yellow eyes. The Vorthak were known as one of the strongest military powers in the galaxy. Krextel watched everything the human crew did with those cold yellow eyes. "Human Commander," Krextel said in his deep voice, "your species moves too slowly. We should have reached the target hours ago." Wu Jin kept his face calm, but inside he felt angry. The Vorthak always acted like humans were stupid or weak. "We're following safety protocols, Admiral. The nebula's energy fields could damage our ship if we rush." Krextel made a sound that might have been laughter. "Safety protocols? Your people are so afraid of everything." 2 other Vorthak officers stood with their admiral. They whispered to each other in their own language, looking at the human crew and making sounds that seemed like mockery. Wu Jin had learned enough Vorthak to understand some words, but he pretended not to hear them calling humans soft meat and short-lived. "Fools! Commander, I'm picking up something unusual," Haijin called out from her station. She pressed buttons on her communication panel, frowning at the readings. "There's a large object ahead, but it's not showing up on our main sensors. What kind of object?" Wu Jin asked, walking over to look at her screen. "I'm not sure. It's big, maybe the size of a small moon, but it's giving off energy patterns I've never seen before." Taeho looked up from his engineering controls. "The energy readings are off the charts, Commander. Whatever that thing is, it's incredibly powerful." Wu Jin felt his heart beat faster. This could be the discovery they had been looking for. "Take us closer, So Young, but keep us at a safe distance." As the Stellar Dawn moved forward, the mysterious object came into view on the main screen. It was not like anything any of them had ever seen. The object was perfectly round and black, but its surface seemed to move like liquid. Strange symbols glowed blue along its surface, pulsing in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. "By the ancient stars," whispered one of the Calathi crew members. The Calathi looked like large insects with 6 arms and compound eyes. They were known for their scientific knowledge, but even they seemed confused by what they were seeing. "Admiral." Krextel pushed forward to get a better look at the screen. His yellow eyes grew wide, and he began speaking quickly in Vorthak to his officers. Wu Jin noticed that the alien's attitude had changed completely. The mockery was gone, replaced by something that looked like hunger. "Commander," So Young said quietly, "should we contact Coalition Command? This seems like something they need to know about right away." Wu Jin nodded. "Haijin, send a message to—" "No," Admiral Krextel said sharply. "We will study this object first. The Coalition can wait." "Admiral, our mission orders require us to report any major discoveries immediately." Wu Jin replied, trying to keep his voice respectful but firm. Krextel's 4 arms crossed over his chest. "Your mission orders come from the Coalition Council, where the Vorthak Empire has significant influence." "I am changing those orders." Wu Jin felt a cold fear in his stomach. This was not how Coalition missions were supposed to work. Each species had equal say in decisions, especially on scientific missions. But Krextel was acting like he owned the ship and everyone on it. "Taeho, begin detailed scans of the object," Krextel commanded, ignoring Wu Jin completely. Taeho looked at Wu Jin, waiting for orders from his real commander. Wu Jin wanted to object, but he knew that fighting with the Vorthak could make things worse. "Do it, but be careful. We don't know what that thing might do if we disturb it." 4. The next 6 hours, they studied the mysterious object. The more they learned, the more amazing it became. The object was incredibly old, maybe millions of years. It contained technology that was far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The energy it gave off could power entire star systems, but As they worked, Wujin noticed that the alien crew members were acting strange. They whispered to each other when they thought the humans weren't watching. Admiral Krextel spent a lot of time talking quietly with his officers and the other alien representatives. "Commander," So Young said during a break, "something doesn't feel right. The way they're looking at us, ... "I know," Wujin replied quietly. "Keep working, but stay alert." As the day went on, the tension on the bridge grew thicker. The humans did their jobs, but they all felt like they were being watched by predators. Admiral Krextel kept asking detailed questions about the object's power source and how it might be moved or controlled. "This artifact," Krextel said to his officers in Vorthok, not knowing that Wujin understood some of their language, "could make the Empire the strongest force in the galaxy. But we cannot let the humans report this to the Coalition." Wujin's blood turned cold. He realized that their mission had become something much more dangerous than scientific research. The aliens weren't planning to share this discovery with the Coalition. They wanted to take it for themselves. Late that night, while most of the crew was sleeping, Wujin quietly contacted his human officers. They met in a small storage room where they could talk without being overheard. "Something bad is going to happen," he told them. "I think the Vorthok are planning to steal the artifact." "What can we do?" asked Haijin. "They outnumber us, and their weapons are better than ours." "We follow our training," Wujin said. "We protect the mission and the Coalition's interests, no matter what." But even as he said those words, Wujin had a terrible feeling that it might already be too late. The way Admiral Krextal had been looking at them wasn't just hunger for the artifact's power. It was the look of someone who had already decided that the human crew was a problem that needed to be solved. The next morning would bring answers, but not the kind any of them wanted to hear.